My boyfriend and I bought a house on the outskirts of the city, about 30 minutes away. 20 minutes further than our home was an abandoned army base, where a lot of kids and young adults would explore, and everyone said it was so creepy. That was right up my alley. The thing about the base that it was back in the day it was used as an army base, with the main headquarters on a tall hill, and below were homes used to house the military families. Also, there was a school, church, recreation home, community center down below where the homes were. What made this place so weird was that everything was abandoned in the middle of nowhere, except for the homes, which were still being used as low-income housing. To top off the creepiness of it all, every home had a tunnel going from the basement up the hill into the main base. Now those tunnels are filled in with cement, keeping people from using them, but still pretty creepy. My boyfriend had lived there for a brief time with his mom, brother, and 2 sisters when he was about 14. Him and his sisters have stories about seeing things in the house, including a small girl running through the hall of their mom's room. When my boyfriend got up to check, it wasn't either of his sisters, as they were still in bed, and there was no one in his mother's room. But I digress. One night, we were at our home with a few friends sitting around the fire pit, when someone suggested we go check out the base. It was around 11 p.m., which was a good time to go, but you had to be sneaky about it. There were people living at the bottom of the hill, and they would often report you to the police for trespassing. Narcs. I had never been there, and I was very excited to go. I had heard all the stories, and I had wanted to go for a while. We all piled into our friend's truck, 5 of us, and headed over. Once we got there, we had our lights turned off and quietly drove into the recreational hall parking lot. We were getting our nerves together to go out and head up the hill, passing out flashlights and looking around to make sure there was no one watching. We would have to sneak out of the truck and quietly run up the road until it reached the part that had some good tree cover. Just then, someone said, "Hey, what is that light?" We were all looking up the hill through the bushes. We could see a little light bouncing around. If we could see it for a few seconds, and then it would be gone beyond the trees, then it would be back, and then gone again. Finally, it was gone for good. We decided, yeah, it was weird, but let's go anyway. Just then, at the road going up the hill, where we were going to be going, just as the part where the trees cleared, we all saw something. We couldn't decipher what it was. A person, a shadow. It was moving. It was coming down the hill towards us. Then we saw it was 3 things. Shadows. People or whatever. These 3 shapes looked a lot like soldiers. They each had what looked like rifles resting on their shoulders as they were walking. It was so dark all of us were freaking out. "That looks like soldiers," someone said, followed by, "Are they carrying guns?" We were at the army base and were all seriously considering that this was maybe 3 ghost soldiers. When they got closer, we realized they had something on their faces. It was gray and white. As they came closer, it was skulls. They had skulls for faces. At this point, we were all freaking out. They got close enough, still walking down the hill, for us to realize that they were 3 men, large men, not ghosts, holding baseball bats over their shoulders, with black hoodies and skeleton Halloween masks on. We all slouched down as slow as we could and peeked over the dashboard and from behind the seats. As they came off the base road and onto the house road, they pulled their masks up and light up cigarettes. Walking back to where the house is, we were shocked. What on earth were they doing? Up there, grown men with baseball bats dressed like that. It was terrifying. We should have called the police, but I mean, what would we have said? And what proof would we have that they even did anything? I was worried someone was up there and that they had hurt them. Or that maybe they would have been protecting something that was up there. Who knows? But the scariest part about it all was thinking, what would have happened to us if we would have run up there? What if we would have ran into them in the abandoned army base? Still gives me chills. Needless to say, when they were out of sight, we bolted out of there and went home. I still have never seen the army base, and actually a few years ago they demolished it. The other buildings below are still there and the homes are still being used to this day. I have been back to check out other buildings, but could not get inside. But as I was walking away, I did see a shadow of a man leaning against the side of a building or you can't get into. And I wasn't the only one to see him. I knew it wasn't just a person, because we could see through him. In 2015, my fiancée Chelsea was pregnant with our first child. We didn't know the sex of the baby, but had already been to the ultrasound. I decided to break this cycle and only drive for 2 weeks and come home for 2 days instead of the normal 4 weeks driving and 4-day home. This trip, she decided to come with me as she was feeling restless and wanted to see something new for a change. We were headed to Seattle from Chicago, which is a pretty easy run. Just stay on Interstate 90 and 94 headed west and you're golden. But being 28 weeks pregnant, my wife did need to stop more frequently to pee. The first few hundred miles went wow. She got to see a few sights in the bathroom of many truck stops. We were about 150 miles into the trip at around Hardin, Montana when she said, "Do you see that? There's a woman standing in the ditch." I began to comb the ditch but didn't see anything. "We need to have your eyes checked, there isn't anyone there," I jokingly tell her. She follows a spot in the ditch as if she's really seeing something, and as we pass she looks behind us quickly, never taking her eyes off the spot. I ask her to describe the woman. She replied that she stood about 5'6", with long silky black hair braided into pigtails. She wore a brown gown with white spots all over it. She looked as if she had the skin of a Native American and she was gorgeous. I apologized for not seeing her. On the back of my head, I thought my wife was just seeing stuff. We make it to Hardin, and of course my wife has to pee, and since it's after 4 p.m., we decide to park up for the night at the Loves in case we can't find a spot elsewhere. We park and she begins shaking her leg, trying not to pee herself while I grab our clothes for the shower. We get out of the truck and she's practically dragging me to the door when all of a sudden she stops dead in her tracks. Oh my God, that's her? I look up to see a young Native American woman, but she's wearing jeans and a shirt, and she's selling crafted beadwork. I asked my wife if she was talking about the woman standing beyond the table. She says yes, but she's dressed differently, and I don't understand how she made it here before us when she was standing in a ditch pointing at the truck as we passed by. Wait, she pointed at the truck? I asked kind of curiously, and as she fully extended her arm, bowed at her fist, and pointed a finger at the truck as we were passing. My wife drags me to the table and begins casually browsing, trying not to look suspicious. The woman behind the counter looks visibly disturbed and nervous. A few moments of silence pass and the woman finally breaks the silence. "Having a boy?" My wife looks up nervously and mutters, We don't know. We wanted it to be a surprise." The lady looks down, grabs a small light blue and red beaded headband and says, "Here, take this for your son." My wife hands the lady a 20, but she insists, "No, I cannot take that," and hurriedly begins throwing her works haphazardly into a box, filling it up quickly and rushing to her SUV. My wife and I just stand there in awe as this woman drives away. We walk in, grab food, get a shower, and head back to the truck, not speaking a word the entire time. We are laying in the truck, my wife asks, "Why do you think she believes we're having a boy?" I make a joke saying she may have asked the spirits. My wife, not amused, rolls over and doesn't speak to me for the rest of the night. We finish the trip and head towards home, my wife faithfully gripping the headband the whole time, still not very talkative. We finally make it home, and for the 2 days I'm home, my wife locks herself in our bedroom. The 2 days pass and I leave for 4 weeks stretch, requesting my dispatcher to keep me in the southeast in case my wife goes into labor, so I will only be a day away from home. A week into my trip, my wife calls me and tells me that every night since I left she has had dreams about the Indian woman, that she was praying over her. I tell her it's probably just paranoia or something. We proceed to have our daily checkup conversations. The next 2 weeks pass of the daily normals, except each day my wife tells me she had another dream of the Indian woman praying over her body. Then one day, I get a call she's in labor. I quickly called dispatch, who had me drop my load on another driver and drive home. I get home just as the baby is getting ready to come out. As soon as I walk to the door, the doctor says push, and the baby slides out almost effortlessly. And to our shock, and to the doctor's surprise, he says it's a boy. His first baby pictures were taken with the headband. My wife and I still don't know how the woman knew or even knew who we were. But in case she's listening, we thank you for the headband. And if anyone can explain all that, please do. I live in Georgia, in a small town dubbed the Town of No Hope. We call it this because there is nothing really to do except to go to church, go to work, go to Walmart, and repeat. A little background for my story. This story takes place when I was 10 or so years old in a house that has no prior paranormal activity. I am 18 years old now, and this story still freaks me out. I do not want to give away my real name, so I'll just call myself Alice. I was in my room, taking a nap when I had a weird dream. In it, I saw a young teen girl in my room. I asked her, "Who are you?" And she smiled and walked out of my room. Before she did, though, she said, "I'll see you in a few years, Alice." I woke up and thought it was a strange dream, but paid no heed to it. Later that week, my dad is talking to my mom and he says, "Hey honey, I had a weird dream last night." My mom answers, asking what happened, and he replies, "I dreamed it was a young girl in our bedroom, looking at us, and she just left. She didn't say anything at all." I instantly felt cold all over. Even though I was only 10, I knew my parents might not believe me, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. Fast forward to 4 or so years later, I am now in my room listening to Depeche Mode when I hear my mom call me. I call back, "One sec, Mom." I'll go there. My mom asks why I left my phone on the table. Confused, I said, "Oh, sorry, Mom, I must have left it there, I guess." She says okay and says to be more careful with my things. That night, my dad said over dinner, "Honey, I had a weird dream today." She replies, "Oh, really? What happened?" He said, "Well, I was on the couch and I was watching TV. I looked and saw Alice in a white gown, put her phone on the table and leave." My mom and I never told my dad about my phone. I shrug it off as a weird coincidence and go back to eating because maybe my mom mentioned something to my dad. A few days later, my mom asks, "Alice, I lost my earring. Can you help me search for it?" I said, "Sure, Mom," and started helping her look for it. After about an hour, we give up and go downstairs to make dinner. That night, a mom found her earring on the bedside table. We had definitely searched there, and we did not see it somehow. What was really weird was that next to her earring was a black gem. I do not know what kind it was, to be honest. Okay. At this point, we're both really freaked out and saying, "What the ack?" My parents brushed it off, but I did not. The next day while we were driving, I threw a rock out the window and it fell in our county's lake. I figured that would be it. And how very wrong I was. A few weeks passed and nothing special happened until one day, my dad comes into my room. "Alice, have you seen my wallet?" I frowned. "No, Dad, I haven't." "Have you asked Mom about it?" He frowned and said, "Yes, I have. If you find it, please let me know." And I, of course, told him I would. A day later, he found it in my parents' bed. Again, it was that damn rock next to it. "That's it," I told them. "We are burning white sage in this house." They agreed, and we have had nothing weird happen since. There's still lots of questions that remain unanswered, though. Were the dreams and the rock connected? How would the same rock travel for that length? And, most of all, who is that weird girl? Is she connected? One Saturday night, in the summer of 2010, I was hanging out with this girl named Amber. It was a summer fling during my college years. We were bored and she suggested we go to these hot spring pools out in the middle of the desert. As it was already 10 p.m., it was kind of a dumb thing to do. But, in the spirit of being young and carefree, we grabbed some beer and my pellet gun to shoot jackrabbits, way overpopulated in this area, and their eyes really shone in the headlights. We loaded into the car, drove for an hour, and then hit the dirt road. The dirt road was at least 30 miles long with no civilization, no other cars, no stores, no power lines even. We arrived at the hot springs. It was midnight as we pulled into the open dirt area right off the dirt road. I saw my first car in an hour, a white beat-down van with Cali plates. It was creepy. The shades were hanging on the windows, like there was a lantern out front, and an uneven sloppy setup table. Garbage was randomly scattered on the ground. I was kinda wishing it had a real gun at this point. Right off the bat, not even seeing a person, my sirens were going off. I backed the car into the lots for unloading our camping stuff, and later unknown to be our escape. Amber and I got out of the car. Hello, anyone here? I yelled, hoping the van belonged to some majorly outdoorsy college student, and not some shameless homeless man. Shh, Amber said. They're probably sleeping. No one said anything, so we walked over to the hot spring pool within 20 or 30 feet from the van. Amber and I started undressing. I was sitting on the edge of the pool with my legs dipped in, and she was taking her shirt off. Right when we heard, oh, hey, in a creepy, whispery voice. She immediately threw her shirt back on, and I hopped out of the pool. Shining a light on the far side of it 15 feet away was a man partially peeking around a rock. Holy crap, where'd you come from? I yelled. Didn't you hear me yelling if anyone was here? He replied, I was underwater. As he came around from the other side of the rock, still only showing his head out of the water, he was a white man. A bald head, maybe in his 40s. Not the cool outdoorsy college students I'd hoped for. Trying to decide whether we wanted to stay, I engaged him in conversation. His responses were weird. He never said much. Answered at his speed, even going underwater for a bit only to come up and answer minimally on his own time. He sounded kind of mean. The creepy, oh hey, was an upgrade from his speaking voice. Amber and I looked at each other thinking the same thing, that this guy was pretty weird. In a minute or two I've known him in this conversation, his ping-pongy and informationless answers have already almost fixated fear in me. Oddly enough though, he seemed to have fixated his attention on Amber. As we gathered our things and put our clothes on, he said loudly, "Leaving already?" "Yeah," I said. "We're on a date." "Where you want to go?" he said even louder. I asked him, "Are you alone out here?" Wondering why he spoke so loudly. He said yes. Wanting to change the conversation to let Amber get all our stuff, I asked, "What do you do in California?" He said, "I just got out of Folsom State Prison." Folsom State is just not a prison, but a prison known for violence. Amber and I looked at each other feeling like this situation was getting worse by the second, when all of a sudden, 2 men appeared from the sagebrush by his van. They came out and said hi, smiling like jackals. Both the men were skinny and normal height. They were younger, maybe in their late 20s. I looked over at the man in the pool and smiled, now realizing his lie. "Wowee, your girlfriend is really pretty," said one of the men who appeared out of nowhere. Guessing they were high on meth and probably drunk, and I said thanks, fidgeting the pellet gun around. The man crawled out of the pool, walked over to the van and motioned for them to talk to him. As I did that, Amber and I got to walk into our car. The skinny one, who made the comment about Amber's appearance, jogged over to us and said, "Hey, let me show you a pool you could take a girlfriend to. It's right on the other side of the road, you don't even have to get in your car." He had positioned himself in front of the driver's side door, really pushy. "She can wait here, to make sure it's okay with you." The other men were watching intently, so if I pushed him out of the way, it might have kicked off a battle. "Sure, Amber, let's go." I was going to be damned if they separated us. We walked across the road into the darkness. He asked us while walking, "What kind of gun is that?" Not knowing if he saw the small diameter barrel, I replied, "22, not really powerful, but doesn't matter when you only do headshots." This response was overly confident, but I was pleased he realized what I was saying. On the edge of the road, he started to lead us into a huge thicket of sagebrush. Now was my chance. I grabbed Amber's hand and we quietly walked back to the car swiftly, and the men saw us approach our car, stopped their conversation and faced us. I almost forgot the beer, I said chirpily as we hopped in, then quickly, and equally as quickly, drove as far away as we could. There was no other pool we were going to be led to, just sagebrush. So, I knew we were being led to something bad. Luckily, my intuition kicked in and we got out of there. When I was 13, I'm 32 now, my parents, my brother, and I moved to a 100-year-old schoolhouse. I mean, it was so old it didn't have indoor plumbing of any kind, but we made do. We were used to living rough in eastern Kentucky anyway. Our closest neighbor was the better part of a mile away. Well, it started with the huge windows. Back before electricity was a thing, they made the windows as tall as they could in the schoolhouses to let the light in as much as possible. Well, I was in the kitchen in a large Rubbermaid tub we bathed in. It definitely got the job done. It was nighttime, and I saw what I thought was a big black shadowy person sitting on the hill watching me. When he saw me, he seemed to have run off. My parents thought this was a kid from next door, but this was late at night, and he was kept on a short leash by his grandparents, and he did not fit what I saw in the least. But every so often at night, you'd see flashes of someone on the hill crouched down looking in. My mom finally put thick curtains up because it spooked us so much. One night, my parents were arguing. It was around 3 a.m. and my mom was being awful to my dad as she normally was. I was asleep, but was awakened by a sharp, loud knock at our front door. My dad got up and, bewildered, opened it to no one there. Apparently, it was tired of hearing my mom too. We were all scared. My mom walked me to my bus the next morning because I was terrified. My brother stayed home. While we waited, way off at the distance we hear the largest, loudest, all I can describe is yell, but it lasted for 30 seconds or more. It knew we were there. It was watching us the whole time. As time went on, in the summer, it gets braver and braver, and it seems to get more friendly. My legal cousin, who was legally blind, came to visit us. He could not see well, but especially without his glasses. He was in my mom's room playing the Super Nintendo, and said, "Hey, there was a big man with a beard and long hair looking in the window." He said he figured it was someone we knew, and he didn't have his glasses, so when he asked why he didn't tell us if there was someone there, we'd never talked about our friends or fear of scaring him. Well, the only thing is the window was 7 or 8 feet off the ground. That man would have either have had to been taller than anyone I've ever met, or on a ladder. Another night, my parents had left for the night, and my boyfriend and I were there alone. Something was running around knocking on the outside of our house all night. That was only the second time I'd been scared by them. Let me tell you the first and the worst. My dad and brother started sitting on our stone steps at night trying to have an encounter, and they did. One night, it finally happened. The smaller of the two we saw regularly in our windows shimmied up our hillside into our yard. The scary part is, it crawled on its belly like an army man. I don't know why that unnerved me so bad, but he got almost within touching distance as my mom and I watched through the window. This wasn't like 1998 before camera phones and all that, but it was scary, but maybe not so threatening. We came to the conclusion that we were looking at some creepy mom or son kind of creature thing we don't know. But we moved. We've never heard anything more about it. I've never told anyone this because of fear of ridicule, but there's no reason for me to lie.